Season 2 of Helluva Boss has returned, so here is everything I am claiming you missed and all the little things that I thought about the season premiere. But real quick, if you want to chat about the episode with me and my other online friends, come on down to my Has-Been Lore Discord server. Links, as always, are in the pinned comment down below. Now, Stolas' castle appears in the opening shot again, but this time it has Paimon seal on it, who we now know to be Stolas' father. Despite that, the castle seems to have been built with Stolas in mind, complete with its astral theme. I imagine that there are other castles out there for all the other princes that Paimon is the father of too, each being trained in their own little ways for their Goetia duties in their own little kingdoms. While walking down the long hallway, we can see Stolas' life in the form of portraits, starting as a royal egg, an ugly little chick, and eventually the young Stolas we see. Already, he has an interest in imps, with the beloved stuffed animal making it through 3 portraits with him, really explaining why he would find an imp at the circus so comforting later in the episode. He really is just projecting his love for his childhood toy onto Blitz, and then romanticizing their forced childhood friendship as an adult. Introducing Blitz in this flashback was pretty surprising to me, as I did not expect Stolas and Blitz to be near the same age. The actual writings describing the Ars Goetia and the Lesser Key of Solomon only date back a couple hundred years, but the story of the Ars Goetia is that they were demons that could be summoned and commanded, such as by King Solomon to construct his great temple, itself a legend believed to have taken place around 900 BC. Considering that Stolas only had a few portraits up, I do not think this is an example of a demon who is a child for thousands of years before his special birthday, where he suddenly starts aging. Even if he was thousands of years old, he only seemed to learn about Earth from books and was just learning his studies with the grimoire so he can actually go there, so it's not like he has the real-world history of the character. It just seems a bit odd to me that a demon with hundreds of years of concrete history and thousands of years of mythological history would be born so recently. And its recentness even confuses a lot of the more recent history in the show, so look out for a big timeline video this week as I try to sift through that. That being said, this world does not have to have the same history and mythology as our world, and we do know that it has some distinct differences. Early on in development, there was even plans for there to be superheroes that existed in this world that would also bring their powers with them when they went to hell. While that isn't necessarily canon anymore, it's just a good example of how this world doesn't have to be the same as our world, and thus the mythology that we have that inspired these characters doesn't have to be the same mythology that exists within that world, where these demons may not be known by normal humans like they are here. Regardless, it was really interesting to see that Blitz and Stolas had a history, as I assume that Blitz had just met Stolas relatively recently to starting his business through his industry connections built up through his Circus Act family and bodyguarding for Verosica. One thing that has always bugged me is that the morning pink sky that we see around Stolas' house always seems to indicate that we may be in the Sloth Ring, but in this episode we finally see the house in normal day and we can see that it has a red sky. So Stolas' mansion as well as this Circus Act take place in the Pride Ring. Stolas' mansion seems to have been built right around Imp City, which itself is a relatively new construction starting in 1981, so Blitz's family circus may have been part of an early wave of immigrant imps from elsewhere in hell. Blitz and Fizzaroli seem to have a fascination with Mammon as they get older, and Blitz indicates that he is not from Wrath, so Greed is still a good candidate, assuming his family didn't have roots in the Pride Ring from before the establishing of Imp City. It was also nice to finally see the other performers of this circus also having these marks on their head, indicating that it is a branding of sorts from this circus, which was likely made up of multiple talented families as opposed to just being based largely around Blitz's family alone with a few others joining in. It was nice to see how the two interacted as kids, and how Stolas got to play with his stuffed animal come to life, and just be enthralled by anything this imp wanted to do. Fast forward 25 years later, and we're just a few months before Helluva Boss's story really began. Stolas is in a horrible marriage with Stella, but he is looking after Octavia. He seems to start his mornings with a special pill that has a hard-to-read bottle, but in later scenes we will see that is a Belphegor-branded happy pill. Belphegor is the name of the Prince of the Sloth Ring, according to the Peter Binsfield classification of demons, so these pills are very clearly some sort of drug-you-up relaxer pill that Stolas uses to chill out in his stressful marriage. Even in the morning, Blitz can be seen trying to sneak into the room for Stolas' grimoire. He will later tell Stolas that he is an assassin now, meaning he has decided to start his business, but he knew he would need a portal to the human world to make it work. He's having a hard time getting in, but because of the history that we now know with Stolas, he knows where he's going and what he's trying to get. Some fans, myself included, speculated that parts of the pilot would not be entirely canon to the show and would be revised using flashbacks from episodes such as this one. I had speculated, for instance, that these two demons that Stella is having breakfast with in the pilot were rough drafts for Andreelphis and his wife. Andreelphis being another Arsgoetia demon who has only been seen in storyboard animatics and concept art on Twitter. They have returned in this episode, however, indicating that they are in fact separate characters from Andreelphis, and the story that Blitz relays to us in the pilot about seducing Stolas was reliable. To expand on it by showing us how Blitz actually didn't have to sleep with Stolas but did anyway was an interesting choice, but one that I feel is true to his promiscuous nature that made sexual activity so unimportant for him that he could give it to someone like Stolas who found it extremely important after a lifetime of denial, even if Stolas wasn't necessarily into it. It was even more shocking to see that Stolas was not trying to hide his affair after Blitz slipped out and was openly calling for a divorce at that moment. Blitz of course went by Blitzo early on, and we know that he still used the name when dating Verosica, but here seducing Stolas he is going by Blitz. I had always wondered why he got rid of the name, and while I respect it's kind of a silly sounding name, and Blitz sounds more warlike as Millie's family explained in episode 5, here Stolas confirms that the name was clown-like, a name he probably received as part of his destiny in his family's circus despite eventually sucking at it. Removing the O wasn't just to make him sound more menacing, but to get away from his life as a circus clown and all that wannabe fame he was chasing. When we flash forward to the present now about a year later, we see Stolas is now taking handfuls of those Belphegor pills. Stella of course comes to confront Stolas, and while we may have seen her throw things at him in the past, it is confirmed here that she is not just not afraid to hit him, but that Stolas is so used to it at this point that he knows precisely how to stop her in her tracks, but seemingly never has before. It's a nice implication that Stella wasn't just verbally abusive, but was hitting Stolas knowing there was little he could really do about it that wouldn't result in dire consequences for him. This return to the present may be confusing to some fans who are still wondering what happened to episode 8 of season 1. I explained this in more detail in several videos before, but for those who do not know, the part 2 of episode 8 had to be delayed due to a copyright issue. According to VivziePop, this part 2 was sort of a later addition to season 1 and was more of an animated celebration of the show's progress. I have personally theorized that it would involve Blitz going to a club in the Gluttony Ring to pick up Luna. That turns into its own bigger night. But with the episode having Blitz still return home at the end, making this season 2 finale pick up pretty much in the same place where episode 7 left off. All in all, the plot moves pretty smoothly and it doesn't feel like we missed anything, so wherever episode 8 was meant to fit in the continuity, it will be interesting to see. During Stolas' song, he pulls out a spell book of Asmodeus, and we see a page written in runic code that some fans online have already translated, such as @MarkIsDone on Twitter. According to the translations, these are Asmodeus Crystals, generally granted to succubus so they can go up to Earth, which are often easily used and disguised as jewelry. I have yet to piece together why they are focusing so much on this in the music scene. Perhaps he plans to take a vacation up to Earth though, and that's why we see human Stolas later on in the animatic for season 2. And perhaps he and Octavia accidentally end up there when she goes to steal the grimoire, as we saw in a preview for a future episode, which would make sense to be the second one following this. Perhaps when Blitz and the gang run up to get Octavia, they will be surprised to find Stolas there, who is essentially vacationing in Hollywood and not expecting to find his daughter there, who just wanted to go and be at that comforting place in the stars before accidentally ending up in Hollywood with her dad. Right now, I have about 10 Helluva Boss and Has-Been Hotel videos planned for the next 2 or 3 weeks, so go ahead and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss it. And before you go, check out the teaser for my upcoming project, Cartoon Universe, the movie, the full trailer of which will be available tomorrow.